"You're in the wrong seat, ma'am. Move now." Those first words cut the quiet of the cabin like a blade, and the man saying them looked like he'd done this 1,000 times and never once been told no. I sat there in 1A hoodie up, earbuds out, pretending not to care, but inside my hands were steady. I'd rehearsed this whole thing in my head. Yeah, that happened. Act 1. The quiet before the storm. It was raining sideways at Harrison Field as our charter. A gleaming Aerolux 8800, all black leather and polished chrome, idled at the gate. The cabin smelled like citrus polish and leather conditioner, the kind of smell that tells you this plane has more money than most countries. My name is Maya Carter. I'd spent the last 3 days in neon-lit conference rooms signing papers until my pen bled through the legal pads. I'd just closed the deal to buy Northwind charters at 2:15 a.m., while the rest of the world slept. I booked this flight under my maiden name because I wanted to see how the company ran when no one knew the boss was watching. No fanfare, just a normal passenger's view. "Can I get you anything, Ms. Reed?" the lead flight attendant asked, not knowing my real name. "Sparkling water with lime." "Dim the lights, thanks." I wanted to disappear into 6 hours of soft engine hum and a cold drink. For 4 minutes it worked. Then the main cabin door opened and the world leaned in. Captain Richard Hale came down the aisle like a man boarding his throne. Pressed uniform silver hair, a jaw wired for intimidation. Behind him swaggered Caleb Monroe, hedge fund swagger on 2 legs, foul-mouthed and smelling like expensive whiskey. Hale's eyes scanned the cabin. He saw me in 1A hoodie up, sneakers on, and his smile folded into something like disgust. "Who's that?" he barked at the attendant, the tone like a hand closing around a throat. When I showed my boarding pass and the receipt, paid in full that morning, he didn't care. He smiled a sort of predator's smile. "That seat's reserved for platinum members." "Operational necessity," he said. The classic lazy lie. Guys like him love technical-sounding words because most people don't question them. "Weight and balance," he said. "I've read enough load charts in my life to know that an Aerolux doesn't care about a 100-pound shift from row 1 to row 4. He wanted the seat for his friend, and he wanted the discomfort of telling me to move. I could have made a scene right there, called the board, had him escorted, watched his ego crumble in front of the cabin. But I wanted something better than a tantrum. I wanted proof. Everything he did, every word he uttered, documented. So I stood up, picked up my bag, and I moved. The walk slow, deliberate, the plane watching me like an audience at a play. Act 2. The turning point. Seat 4D smelled like cleaning solution and made a weird grinding sound when it reclined, which it didn't really. I set my phone up like I always do. Encryption secure bridge access to the company logs. Hale was already sliding into my seat, pouring scotch for Monroe as the plane climbed. Monroe was loud, cursing into a speakerphone about markets and making the little people behave. The flight attendant, Jenna, who'd been polite and scared since we boarded, moved like a ghost between them, trying to be useful and invisible. If you've ever seen someone treat a human being like a piece of furniture, you know that feeling. Like something cold and sticky crawling up your spine. Monroe started up again louder, hands wandering. "Hey, sweetheart, loosen up." He slurred toward Jenna, one of those disgusting lines that ages badly the minute it leaves your mouth. She pulled back, eyes wide. Someone should have stopped him then. Someone should have done something. So I did. I stood up, walked into the aisle while the plane did its little Atlantic dance, and I told him plain as day, hands off her. He staggered like I'd slapped him, then reached for Jenna. I stepped between them and said, "You touch her again, I will see you in federal court. No yelling, no threats, just a promise." That's when Hale lost it. He stormed out of the cockpit like a judge delivering a verdict and decided to make an example. He grabbed a pair of plastic flex cuffs from the emergency kit like he was auditioning for a Western, and he slapped them on my wrists. Felt like zip ties on bone. "You're under control," he said, the kind of control that tastes like blood and old uniforms. He told Jenna to sit down or she'd be fired, and he shoved me into the jump seat by the aft lavatory like I was a criminal. He didn't know, he couldn't know, that about 20 minutes earlier I'd sent a short note to Ethan Brooks, the transition manager handling the acquisition, onboard flight en Warschau. 004, monitoring command staff. Do not intervene yet. I wanted witnesses. I wanted board members at the gate. He'd provide his own evidence, the reassignment, the recorded command, the breath of booze on his breath, his own intercom announcement claiming a security threat. He wrote his lie into the manifest, operational necessity, which I screenshotted. He didn't realize he was writing his obituary. The turbulence picked up. Monroe was passed out in my seat, champagne sloshing like a mockery. Hale drank openly in the cabin, a direct violation. Jenna's hands shook as she brought me a paper sandwich. The crew meal, she mouthed apology in every syllable. I didn't eat. I set the sandwich aside and kept working, pulling every file I could, adding notes to the legal pad on my lap, watching men reveal who they are when they think they're safe. Act 3. The payoff and the question. When we touched down at Heathrow, they didn't taxi us to the luxury terminal. We were directed to remote stand 19, the place you send a problem when you want privacy. But this wasn't privacy. This was a showdown. Waiting in the rain were 3 Range Rovers, 2 marked police SUVs, a black Mercedes with a chauffeur, and at the center of it all, Ethan Brooks and Sir Henry Caldwell, the man who runs the Continental Safety Board. Hale's smile went from smug to thin, like a credit card scraping a ledger. He stepped out onto the stairs, ready for his toast. Here's the villain, we'll hand her over. 2 officers in tactical vests climbed the stairs, walked straight to the jump seat, and cut the plastic off my wrists. Dr. Maya Carter, the lead sergeant, asked polite and precise, "We're here to assist." Ethan, my transition manager, didn't wave or smile. He walked to Hale and said in a voice that might as well have been "Steel Captain Hale, you're relieved of command." For a man who'd spent decades believing authority equaled truth, the rug had pulled out from under him mid-stride. He tried to protest. The old eye was protecting the flight line, but the manifest he'd falsified was on record. The cabin voice recorder had the exchange. The complaints in the HR system were a string of old grievances he'd swept under a rug. The safety board didn't need my finger-pointing. His own hands had left the prints. Monroe's life imploded in less than an afternoon. Loyalty, revoked platinum status, canceled a fund partner, freezing accounts once the recording of his assault circulated. Hale's career didn't end there. It collapsed. Sir Henry suspended his license pending investigation. Regulators don't play where air safety and blatant misconduct meet. You call a bully's bluff, and sometimes the world is ready to take the cards you've been dealt. I walked down the stairs, the rain stinging my face, and for a second I felt the weight of everyone who's ever been told to sit down because they didn't look like success. But I also felt something else. Calm, like a tide turning. I told Jenna, take 2 weeks. And, when you come back, head of cabin services. She cried so hard she couldn't say the words, which was a whole other kind of victory. Weeks later, Northwind rebranded. New name, new leadership, new standards. We hung a sign that said, "Respect is non-negotiable." We instituted real reporting, anonymous hotlines, mandatory de-escalation training, the boring hard work of changing a culture. Monroe's fund lost clients overnight when investors saw what the market now saw on loop. Hale is a story people tell when they talk about how power can rot when you stop being accountable. But here's the messy human part. Justice in real life isn't neat. There were lawyers, there were press cycles, and yes, many people accused me of doing it for drama. I lost friends who thought I should have handled it privately, and I gained critics who said power corrupts no matter who holds it. That's the part I want you to think about. What does winning look like? Is it the public humiliation of a man who thought he was untouchable? Is it a promotion for a flight attendant who was brave enough to survive? Is it policy changes that actually make flights safer? Final beat, a question for you. So, I want to know, what would you have done in Jenna's shoes or in mine? Have you ever been sized up and dismissed because of how you looked, and then had to decide whether to speak up? Tell me the moment you wished you'd handled differently or the time you stood up and surprised yourself. I read every story. If this hit a nerve, hit like, share, and subscribe. Not because I need followers, but because the conversation needs to keep going. Comment below. Is public exposure the right tool for fighting everyday injustice, or does it create new problems? Debate me, correct me, tell me your story. Because stories like this aren't about me proving something. They're about all of us figuring out how to treat one another better.